Leadership has always been something that's fascinated me, and sales is definitely a category of leadership. There's just no doubt about it. In fact, I'd even say that whether we realize it or not, every aspect of some aspect of all of our lives encompasses some sort of sales skills. And you've been selling business to business for quite a long time. But let's start with this. How did you get involved in sales? Why sales? Hey, Justin, it is good to see you. I have not seen you face to face for a long time. I can't remember the last time I've seen you, physically in person versus this virtual thing that we're doing right now through Zoom. But I just want to say, hey, hello. Thanks a lot for being part of this podcast. Justin, your family, the Boggess family, and my family, the Piper family, we have known each other. Let's think about it. I think it was 1995.
Goodness,
1995.
yep.
So that 27 years. There was soccer mixed into that with your brother. There was a lot of activity, in your neighborhood and shared relationships. There was a church that we were launching. There was a lot of reasons why we, interacted. But it's good to see you.
Yeah, you as well, Jim. Thanks for having me on. And I'm kind of regretting maybe doing this now. You know too much about me. So that's terrifying.
Well, it says a lot, right? It says a lot. I think a lot about what you've accomplished personally. I mean, I know that you went quite far in hockey, in ice hockey, and not everybody does. So that tells me a lot about who you are. It's just kind of been fun watching you fall in love and with your bride and having this precious family that you now have. Remind me what your daughter's name is. She's 2.5, but
2.5, Clara Ray.
Clara Ray.
Yeah, yeah.
She is a beauty. You can tell she's got a lot going on.
Yes, she's I don't know where she got the smarts from, but she's got it. So we're definitely in trouble.
Yeah. Well, Mandy used to run our household, and so I kind of think you maybe have fallen into the same trap.
I think so. I remember that. So
Yeah, you do. Well, listen, let's jump right in. Our podcast is about leadership. It comes from a spiritual worldview. It comes from a character mindset. It's really about shaping the character of leadership. I've always been amazed at how one coach can take a team farther than another team that might have the same skill sets, not just one season, but consistently, or a business or a ministry or whatever. And so leadership has always been something that's fascinated me, and sales is definitely a category of leadership. There's just no doubt about it. In fact, I'd even say that whether we realize it or not, every aspect of some aspect of all of our lives encompasses some sort of sales skills. And you've been selling business to business for quite a long time. Let's start with this. How did you get involved in sales? Why sales?
Why sales? Well, if you were talking to 16-year-old Justin, I'd be a little upset with you. That's what my dad did. He came to me and he's like, Justin, you might end up going into sales. And I remember my response was it was not good. But I didn't know any better, right? I had no idea what was out there in the world of sales. All I thought was, oh, used car salesman, nasty, manipulative, right? But how did I get here? I finished my degree in marketing, and my very last course was a sports marketing class. And every entry level position in sports marketing is ticket sales. And I was fortunate enough to attend it's kind of like a role play competition, and it was selling tickets and things like that. And my team won. And I actually enjoyed role play, and I was like, all right, well, there's something there. And sure enough, after a bunch of interviews between marketing and sales, I ended up I ended up in sales. So, and haven't looked back.
Let me ask you this, just out of curiosity. So you did go, you were an accomplished hockey player. You still play hockey. You told me that before we hit the record button, that, you just went down to the rink. I was able to picture that rink because I know where that's at, in Denver. But to be an elevated hockey player, you've got to be fiercely competitive. I would think. Is there a parallel between sales and competition?
100%.
Yeah.
I'd be lying if I said it's not one of the characteristics that probably makes me pretty good in the role. So absolutely. I think that's probably initially what sparked in me the desire to kind of see what sales was all about. I felt that I was creative, so that's why I led towards marketing, but kind of got steered back towards sales. And the serendipity of it all is that I get to be creative every day in the way I solution things to my clients. So I kind of get the best of all worlds.
Yeah, it's almost like you're like, well, what position did you play in hockey?
I was a defenseman, so
You're a defenseman.
I sat back and watched all the really really good players.
That's not true. I have a Lidstrom jersey hanging in my other room, and he scored a lot of goals, and he was considered probably one of the best wings during the Red Wings years. And I know we're enemies in that sense. And the Avs are sure looking. They should win it all. They
They should.
they really should win it all. But anyway, looks like I still got another few years before I can root on the Red Wings. But where I was going with that, Justin, is just kind of like almost all sports has something to do with angles, right? And finding those angles, keeping the as a defender, I would imagine. Now I don't think I ever coached you in soccer. I don't think you. As I recall, you were already doing hockey. Your brother was doing soccer and hockey, that kind of thing. And he's a goalie, right?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. So that's kind of where I was, going is you're looking at angles, with clients and companies, and you're looking at how can this land, how can this message land, how can it get in the back of the net, versus getting blocked, or how can you keep an objection from knocking the deal out of there. But we're kind of talking about the characteristics of a salesperson. So let's continue. Why don't what do you see? I kind of saw the obvious one to me, which was I would think generally you got to have some kind of a competitive spirit. But what else would you say are characteristics of hiring a good salesperson?
Yeah, and I think you're keying in on it, right? It's in the hiring process, you're not going to necessarily understand that person's character. Maybe you can try, you can start digging at it.
Right.
So you're looking for, do they have a track record of results? And then are they good? Can they actually articulate how they achieved those results and the behaviors that went into those things and what made them successful? And then you're starting to cue into, right, their results and their ability to do the job, or their competence in doing the job. So at least you can kind of hit at that level, and through that conversation, their character will start to show itself. But it's harder to glean just from that an initial interview. But certainly a good track record of results, the ability to articulate those results, and you'd hope, and not in every case, that a salesperson is going to come into an interview environment and treat it like a business meeting, and you'd hope their nerves weren't getting the best of them. I'd say that one is kind of hit or miss, right?
Yeah.
But I look for that ability to just come in and communicate and have a good dialogue.
Can we camp on that? You
Yep.
said they should be able to articulate their how. So I'm interviewing a salesperson. Let's say, what are some of the questions that, off the top of your head, or how do I get that out of them? I mean, can I just say, share with me how you got these results, or and if I did it that squarely, what might somebody say? How,
Sure. I think it generally, right? Hopefully their resume's got some sort of results already written on it. So I'd key you into some of those and just, hey, how did you achieve that quota? What made you successful that year? And then, hey, what was one of the keynote deals of that year? How did you go about actually hitting, achieving that one deal? I'd certainly want to know if they lost, right? And how did they handle that? And what do I want to hear? I wouldn't say there's anything in particular. Again, I just need them to be able to explain it with confidence. Um, if it feels clunky, maybe it didn't happen, or again, maybe they just might not present well to a client, right?
Yeah.
So that's the kind of thing I'm looking at.
Yeah, and you have built some sales teams and been and coaching and developing sales team. Out of curiosity, has anyone ever admitted, like, that was a great year because I just walked into a situation that was just too easy, low hanging fruit everywhere? Does anybody ever say that, or do they tell you a more grander story?
It's usually a grander story. They
Because
might
they're
tell me that
sales.
they might tell me they had a few pieces of low hanging fruit
Okay.
that help propel them. But I mean, ultimately, that's okay.
Yeah.
A salesperson's confidence is often gleaned from those type of situations. And so I'm okay with that too. Again, as long as they can articulate and tell me a good story about how they hit their quota, I might be okay with it, depending on the circumstance and where I see them fitting in on the team. So
I like where we're going with this because a lot of what I do is nonprofit work, and so I don't really sell, but I do look for donors who believe in what I'm doing and think it's worthy to to contribute to. And even in those seasons, I noticed that there seems to be seasons of great harvest, and then there's other seasons where it's like a drought, even though I'm doing the same thing. Even though I'm doing the same thing. When you're in interviews looking for new salespeople to join your team, is that kind of what you were talking about in losing? And you want to hear them talk about losing and how they dealt with it?
certainly, I mean, that's really how you're going to start to see their character, right?
Hmm.
If of course they might smooth over the rough edges of how they really responded. But maybe there's a success story in there, right? Maybe if they can really sit there and say, yeah, I lost and this is why, and this is how I handled it. If they changed a behavior or maybe never did that thing again that lost them the deal, that's kind of what I'm looking for. Um, a lot of that is probably from self-reflection. Maybe they had a good coach or mentor that helped them reflect on why they lost. But it's an important skill set to have.
I wonder if somebody's too honest in an interview, if they lose those jobs. Because, like, if you asked me, if you said, Jim, have you had seasons of drought, I would not only say yes, but I would also tell you how it made me feel. I was tempted to do something easier, as if there is something easier. That's a whole nother philosophical discussion. But and I would experience anger of those who promote how successful they are, almost to a point of this is easy, and I'm not experiencing uh, easy. It seems like the people that I have talked to outside of this conversation, you really do get to know people when you're on a sales team together, because of the ups and downs, that uh, that come. Well, let's turn it on you for a second as a
Sure.
salesperson. Justin, what motivates you? Wait. Before we do that, I have to tell you about a memory that I have of you.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. It's good. It's good because it fits with this. Even though I knew you more at a distance than I knew your brother, when I guess your practice was over sometimes or whatever, and I would see you approaching the soccer field, whether it was to support Ben in a soccer game, or my practice wasn't quite over yet. I never really saw you lumber onto the field. You kind of reminded me of Tigger. Uh, I I never really saw you walk in a straight line. It was like you were bouncing, hopping, this way and that. And if I had to make a guess, if someone would have said, "What do you think that young man's going to be doing?" I said, "Well, he's an influencer for sure. He may not even know where he's going, but he knows he's going somewhere." And if you asked him, "Where are you going?" You may say, "I don't know, but let's go." That's kind of thing. So have you gotten in touch? Because we're gonna get in another topic here towards the latter part of the podcast about exactly what you sell and what that's really about. And that's kind of where I'm leading. But how in touch are you, Justin, with what motivates you? It's a two-part question. And how do you help others make that connection of what motivates them? I guess today we call it the why, right? What motivates you?
Yeah. You asked me this coming out of college, I would have been like, just give me some money, get me a job, right? And
Let me go snowboarding.
yeah, buy my Epic pass so I can go skiing and go hang out with friends and have a good time, right? But it's taken time, and I think it's a good question because you do need to reflect on it and really think about what it is, and it shouldn't be something that just comes to you like that. It'd be easy for me to sit here and go, "Oh, it's money. I'm a sales guy," right? That drives me, and it's certainly a requirement in my life. But what motivates me is we were hitting on it earlier. I need to have something ahead of me that I can go be creative. I need to have time with people. COVID was a little scary at the beginning. I was like, oh gosh, how am I going to make these connections? How am I going to, get to meet my clients? How am I going to really understand what they do and what they need? And if I'm not right there in the room with them. So thank goodness for platforms like these. But it's every day having something else to go talk to a client about and understand their challenges and be genuinely motivated by, I think we have the thing, or maybe it's not, but helping them be successful. It is that I genuinely that's it for me. And that's what brought me to Franklin Covey. It being in the technology world and the work I was doing, technology changes so fast that you might walk in and sell a great solution and it's going to be great for them for a few months, and then there's the new thing.
Yeah.
And it was exhausting. And the work I get to do now, it's life changing on an individual basis, but also at an organizational basis.
So what are some of the
Great place to be.
things, yeah, what's some of the feedback and what's some of the things that you hear from your clients that kind of feeds that satisfaction slash motivation?
It could be anything. A lot of what we do is assessment, right? And just seeing results is wonderful. But actually having an individual from one of our work sessions come up and say this is life changing, or that they went to one of our work sessions 27 years ago and it changed their life, that keeps me going. But when I get, one of the executives that I'm working with, when they get a promotion or when they get accolades for, what ultimately was part of our partnership, oh man, you, you can't stop me then. There's nothing that fires me up more to go back out and find more of those clients or duplicate that type of work, than something like that.
When were you first exposed to the 7 habits of highly effective people?
I tell this story pretty confidently, but it was somewhere in the first week or two of my professional career. I think it was probably day one. I had about 6 people tell me, go read, Winning Friends and Influencing People. And then I think the other half of the office that I was working in was like, go pick up 7 habits. I picked up both, and 7 habits, I mean, was life changing for me. I would say I leaned pretty heavily towards braggadocious when I walked through that door for the first day of my professional career, and the 7 habits hit me right between the eyes. Um,
There's a lot of good books out there, and I don't, and I often, in fact, I just picked up one that just was delivered. Amazon's amazing. I mean, you could literally sometimes make a order and walk to your front porch and it's there. But just a shout out to Ryan Hawk of the Learning Leader Show. He just finished a book called The Pursuit of Excellence, and I just started reading that. I enjoyed reading that, but I was first exposed to the 7 habits of highly effective people when I was a youth pastor. I think I was about 27 years old. I don't think I had been exposed to it while I was an executive with Bank of America. But some of the things that most struck me was the idea of writing a mission statement. For some reason, I had never been exposed to that kind of coaching. The whole principle center idea is the second thing that I would list. But overall, I describe, even to this day, even though it's dated, it's not dated in the sense of the material. It was written a while ago. I honestly use the word ingenious and brilliant. It's just to me. So I have it on audiobook. I have it on Kindle, and I have it in the library behind me. People say, "How often do you read it?" I'm always reading it in one of those formats, either through Kindle on the plane. Sometimes I'd like to have the hard copy in front of me when sometimes I'm preparing a talk or whatever. But when I'm running, I don't really run. Well, at least doesn't look like running to others. It looks like I'm sprinting as far as I'm concerned. But I'll listen to the audio, book, and pretty powerful stuff. So I get excited when I meet men younger than I am, like yourself, who have engaged in that. Let's don't leave that yet, Justin. Let's talk about that for a minute. What are the principles? What might be the one, two, or three principles that speak most to you in the 7 habits, at least at your phase in your season in life? It might just be one, or maybe it's two or three. I know they're all good, but which ones? I'm just out of curiosity.
I'd say they've changed, right? And I think that's why
Yeah.
it is such a powerful
Yeah.
powerful book. You could read it at any stage of life and it's going to hit you differently.
Yeah.
And today, I lean more towards the relationship side, right? And so, beginning with the end in mind, though, is certainly something that I'm constantly having to focus on, right? And continue to develop that as a skill and a behavior, whether it's clients, whether it's in my marriage, whether it's with my daughter. I'd say particular with my daughter in this day and age. But then and synergizing has become so important to me. Walking through the door at Franklin Covey, 3 weeks later, COVID hits. I had no choice but to reach out and start meeting all of my colleagues and understanding how to do this job, and what is their take on doing it the way we now had to do it in this virtual environment. But then on the flip side of that, right, with clients, they just really commiserating and understanding that they're learning how to do their job in this new environment too. And it's one that may not be going away, but I'm certainly glad I kind of had the 7 habits to fall back on and go, this is what a wonderful time. It forces a different type of synergy that you may not otherwise have had. So that's certainly it. And you asked for maybe 3.
Well,
Sharpen
you
the
don't have
saw.
to give 3. Yeah.
That's okay.
Sharpen the saw. Yeah.
Sharpen the saw. My dad.
Oh yeah.
That guy likes to work, and
Yeah.
and as much as he instilled a very good work ethic in me, I personally, it's like I need to find that good balance. And I wanted to. So this working from home thing has been wonderful. Getting to see Clara grow up and be around Stephanie as much as we do get to be around each other, and but that's still, taking that time to, all right, it's wonderful, we're home and we have this environment, I get to see Clara a lot, but are we really going out doing the things that we enjoy? And so you asked me about I told you about going to play hockey over my lunch
Yeah.
today, and
I think that's awesome.
things like that I try to make a priority, and it's blocked out on my calendar. So
I'm going to. It's funny that you started with the one that you did, because being a massively competitive person myself, I don't even like how competitive I am, which tells you that I'm even competitive, because I'm measuring my competitiveness. It's just like it's a sick cycle, but there it is. But I found that he exposed in his book, he exposed a lot of weaknesses in me that I didn't even realize. And keeping the end in mind was certainly one of them, because my typical behavior was I would just I would start something, I would walk into something, and I would never really think about what off ramps. I wouldn't think about, how long will I do this, or I just I never did. And so what would sometimes happen is I would one day wake up and say, I'm done. And when you live life that way, it's pretty erratic. And so I remember I flew out to Chicago to meet with a friend of mine who just took on a new post of one of the largest companies in America. And while we were sitting in his office, and this was still within the first few months that he had been assigned to this new post as president, I said, "So what are you going to do?" And he said, and I quote, "Well, I'm thinking about how this is going to end." And I said, wait a second, you haven't got started yet. He says, "Oh, no. I'm thinking about the objectives that I need to accomplish, how long that will take me to accomplish those things, most likely, and then what will be that healthy off ramp for everybody." And I looked at him and I said, "I have never thought that way. I have never thought that way." And though keeping the end in mind has many applications, that's certainly one of them. And it led me to understand the power of that kind of thinking, Justin, when it comes to designing culture. When you're trying to build a culture on your team, what we don't realize sometimes is that culture happens. It is happening. You have a culture, but it either happens by design or by default. And when it happens by default, it's usually not a very good thing. And that's kind of related to keeping the end in mind, right? It's being very principle centered on that. So, you and I share a love for sports, but we also share a love for the seven habits. And I think that's kind of cool. Let's say that there is somebody that's thinking about getting involved in starting a career in sales, and they're somewhat new, or they're just getting started. What are some what's some mentoring, what's some advice that you would share with those people listening?
Oh man, that's a great question. Um, I'll just go back to seven habits, right? Learn to listen. You might think you do it. You're probably not great at it. Practice that art of listening. And don't be bashful. Take notes. It's important. But don't think you know it all either. Always be ready and willing to learn, and that certainly goes to seeking feedback and getting good at receiving it.
That's powerful stuff. How many people do you think listen to you when you give that advice?
Oh man, those are both hard. If I'm talking to a bunch of salespeople, the listening one just went in one ear and out the other. We are notoriously bad listeners. So kudos to all you good, successful salespeople out there that have mastered the craft. I think it's something you need to continuously work on.
No, that's really good. I was talking to a HR executive a couple weeks ago, and I said, "How would you like me to describe to this potential candidate the kind of person that you're looking for?" And without hesitation, she said, they need to have a good dose of humility and listening skills. I thought that was that, man, if someone did bring that in, then they're setting themselves up, for success. So Justin, you're involved really in the people development, personal development, leadership development arena. You represent the Franklin Covey organization. Tell us about what that is exactly. I'm pretty well versed in it, other than some of the new technical advances, that you all have made. But what is Franklin Covey? How does it work? What is this leadership thing about? How do you feel about it? I would just love to hear you give me a dissertation about your conviction in this whole thing.
Sure. Well, Franklin Covey, I'll keep this concise. We kind of focus on four key things with our clients. It's building effective individuals at all levels of an organization. It's developing culture within your organization, developing leaders at all levels, and implementing framework, or a time tested framework for strategy execution. Those are kind of the 4 ways that we might partner with any given organization of any size, quite frankly. But conviction around development. When I received those books early in my career, I probably cringed. Wasn't much of a reader, but I was like, all right, I got to take this seriously. I'm a big boy now. I've got my big boy job. I gotta learn how to pick up a book and read. So I made my way through those books, and it was really the first time my company had invested in me to go to something that wasn't our onboarding training, that jumped out at me. And in this particular event, there was kind of this 360 component of our office leader, and it was mind blowing to me and life changing. It challenged me to really think about who my mentors were. Do those people know if they were my mentors? And then they of course challenge you to go make sure those mentors know that that's how you look at them. And I was like, wow, this is what corporate training can be. Oh, that's kind of interesting. And so I just kind of started the wheels spinning on what else is out there. How else does this work? Is this one of the best? Is there something better? And so I always kept looking. I was always kind of keeping my eye on who was doing what in the industry and how were things being done, how was adult learning being done, and my interest just started to go in that direction. So I was in the technology staffing world at that time, and slowly worked my way towards this Franklin Covey thing. And what is it? What is leadership development, and what's it all about? One of the most staggering statistics I've ever probably come across as that relates to this topic specifically was that most leaders have been in their position as a leader for about 12 years before they receive any formal management or leadership training.
12 years.
12 years. And when you think about those people who are promoted into that leadership position or given that management position, they're probably one of the top performing people on their team. And that's what allowed them to be promoted or gave them the opportunity to be promoted. So they're very good at the tactical skill of doing that job. And it's not the same when you get into leadership. And so that's why I believe it's important, just from a pure tactical managing and leading people perspective. But Jim, I think what you've cued into a couple of times is culture is intentional. And so the questioning that I always have with any client, new and just we need to retouch on is hey, how do you want your culture to look? What are we shooting for? How are we going to measure that thing?
Yeah.
And then from a leadership standpoint, hey, what is your leadership? Describe it to me. What do you need it to be? Where do we want to go? What does this thing need to look like? Do you have a leadership culture? How would you describe it? Right. All of those things. And I'll leave it there, but that's why I'm convicted about it, because I agree with you in that culture is intentional. And if you just let it happen, it's not going to be what you want it to be. And you're not going to keep the people that are going to get your business where it needs to go.
Are you familiar with the name Peter Drucker?
Yep.
Yeah, Peter Drucker. So he was kind of, he's a guy I never met, but he was my mentor in the sense of, the books that he wrote, and as I was trying to get better, as a person. And you really do have to humble yourself. Don't you think, to get better, because you have to be willing to admit that, gosh, there's a lot of angles to all of this, and maybe I don't know how I come off. Maybe I don't, see everything I need to see. But you mentioned something that really has got my curiosity. I wrote it down. It says the research shows that someone is in leadership for 12 years before they, you said leadership, right? 12
Yep.
years before they start receiving any kind of leadership training. In your experience, does that 12 years of an absence of formal or at least intentional training make them more receptive or less receptive? Because I've been doing this for 12 years. Why do I need this now? Or my gosh, I've been doing this for 12 years, and somebody help me. I mean,
Yeah.
what do you experience out there?
It's anything and everything, right? But it's all about how you approach the topic.
Hmm.
I think what's kind of changing out there in the workplace now is this idea of training and coaching being something that is trying to fix something or trying to fix me or do something to me, as the learner or the coachee. And it's just not the case, right? Again, we're speaking about culture. That's our target in most cases. Um, and yeah, you're going to get those people who are they think they figured it out.
Yeah.
Okay. They've been in this position 12 years. They've been a manager. They've got it. I don't need to go to that thing. I know all these skills. You can quickly turn that on its head by going, oh, then great. Would you mind being a facilitator for us? And they go, no, I'll just show up.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So,
Exactly.
they can find themselves back in their seat pretty quick. But you talked about, being humble, and I was lucky enough to have a pretty direct leader. I was probably 8 months into my staffing career. I'd found a nice little niche in recruiting very, very specialty healthcare technology skill sets. And we had some other folks working on this particular piece of business and trying to find these candidates for this role. And this leader was getting all up angry that no one else was finding candidates except for me. And I made some smart comment in our morning meeting, and he pulls me aside after, and he's like, "Hey, I appreciate what you're doing." He's like, "You're doing a good job." He's like, "But I'm going to leave you with one of my favorite quotes." He says, "Be humble or be humbled."
Hmm.
I'm not kidding you. I printed it out and put it across the top of my computer because I was like, "Oh my God, is that really how I'm showing up? Like, am I really that guy?" That I thought it was friendly, healthy competition, but apparently I was going a little too far.
That
So
is amazing that he shared that, because there is a Christian text in Scripture, James 4:6, where it's kind of an exhortation. And if you were to exegete the meaning, I mean, it goes like this: humble yourselves in the sight of God, and in the proper time, He will lift you up. And when we teach on that, we teach exactly what he said. We said, so here's the deal. It's our job to humble ourselves. No one else's job. It's our job. And if we don't do it, something or someone else will end up doing it sooner or
yep.
later. So it's great that you mentioned that. I mentioned Peter Drucker earlier, and you and I have kind of on probably not by accident, we have landed in this area of culture. And he is known for saying that culture. Now he's a strategy guy, right? I mean,
Yep.
Drucker is a high level strategy guy. That's what he's known for, and being an effective executive, et cetera, et cetera. But my favorite quote is culture eats strategy for breakfast every morning. And a lot of people, a lot of leaders will say, "Well, exactly what is culture?" And I don't know how you guys answer it, so I want to ask you it. The way that we answer it is, well, it's just simply what you see people do, in a default. I mean, it's one way to answer. There's probably multiple ways, but how do you in a elevator speech say this is what culture is?
It's not that much different than what you just said. It's
Yeah.
kind of, hey, when your leaders leave the room, what do your people do?
Wow.
Right?
That's good. So
Uh,
once the top down is gone, what is the truth? Yeah, that's good. I had not heard that. That's very good. Now, Justin, you haven't always been representing the Franklin Covey brand. You were in technology, as I understand it. I think sales, right? Sales and
Yep.
technology. So how did you go from that to this?
Yeah. Well, it's all serendipitous, right? And I think I told you that I quickly in my technology staffing days realized, hey, this corporate development, leadership development thing is kind of cool. I dig it. I buy in. And so I had the opportunity to move into technology training. And like I was also mentioning how quickly technology changes,
Oh
and
yeah.
impact was so short-lived of the work we would do. It was like, all right, I'm in there. We give some amazing training. We develop everyone around some sort of cloud technology. Companies off and running. 8 months later, they need to spend another X number of $1 million to buy the next thing, and they bring me back out. And so it became almost thankless, right? And it was almost like, all right, Justin, we'll talk to you again when we have another order. And it wasn't as consultative as I really felt like I wanted to be. I wasn't solving these huge problems, these huge challenges to the business. I was just filling a void. And so a lot of this is reflective. I wasn't I didn't have it this well captured while I was living it. But I was like, man, this is not what I don't think this is what I want to be doing. It was more of a midlife crisis kind of thing. I was like, I don't know, what do I do next? So Franklin Covey called me, and they recruited me. And at first it was going to be a step back. I was leading a sales team for a technology staffing and training company. And Franklin Covey called. I said, I probably should just take this call. I mean, the 7 Habits, I love it. I still talk about it. Like you, Jim, I probably am reading it in some capacity at about any given point in time. And so I took the call, and every person that I talked to walked the talk. And I just kept going through, and they made it kind of a no-brainer for me at the end. And I just said, what an amazing company. They, the between everybody I talked to, and then the offer they gave, it was like, there's no question. This is exactly where I was supposed to be at exactly this time. All of my experience up to this point has led to this. And here I am 2.5 years into it, and they've relocated me from Arizona to Colorado and given me more opportunity than I can imagine. So
It makes me want to jump on board at my young age and get involved, start over again with Franklin Covey. But it sounds like it's not like what you were doing wasn't important, but if to use my own words, it maybe felt a little transactional, whereas you're kind of in this coveted place where you really are involving transformational relationships. And it kind of reminds me of a text. I just pulled it up that I'm not going to read it word for word, but my wife sent this to me. Before you and I hit the record button, you asked me how I was doing. I asked you how you were doing. And I told you that there was a word that I would use over the last 2 or 3 weeks was rich. And I guess I couldn't hide it because my wife sent me this yesterday. It basically is a text. I left the house, and she says, it really puts a smile on my face when I see you do what you do, because it's obvious that you love what you do because it impacts other people. And she goes into, and it's just been a heavy few weeks of coaching people. Coaching doesn't mean everything that they should be doing, but it means that you're in it, with them, and you're wrestling with whatever it is. And it's very transformational, and it's a component of leadership development, which is of course what we've been talking about. What does your schedule look like? I mean, I wanted to ask you, so what did you do during COVID? How did you, were people interested in leadership development in COVID? I made a note to myself. See, I'm being a good student. I've been taking notes while you've been talking, and I put a little asterisk. Come back to that.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't think of anything that might have been counterintuitive, because a lot of people got sick, and I don't just mean physically sick with COVID, but also went through a lot of psychological difficulties, and maybe still, maybe that's still happening today. But what did you all do during that COVID thing? What was your approach? How did you pivot?
Sure. I think like most, we had a big pause, 3-month, 4-month pause of clients really not knowing what to do. And fortunately, we were in a good place to take our business into a digital virtual environment, and we pivoted just fine. I would almost dare say seamlessly. Again, I'll just go ahead and say that was very fortuitous for me. I was, one of the last employees in before COVID, and I certainly was sweating there for a bit. But again, the leadership was very transparent about exactly where we were at as a company, and if layoffs were coming, we'd be well aware of it. And fortunately, we didn't have to do any of that. On the client end of things, it was interesting to see who reached out and who wanted to just keep moving things forward, and how quickly some of those clients said, all right, I know we were talking about 100 people, we need to quadruple down, and
Wow.
it's 400 people.
Wow.
And it's for exactly the same reason that you're describing, right? It's the psychological impact that this pandemic has had on people, and they needed people to know that they were investing. And sometimes it went from a leadership program to a 7 habits, and it was just to give them some time to reflect and figure out who they are in
Yeah.
this time, in this pandemic, like what does this mean to them, and
A
really
great
take some.
time.
Yep. I had one client who did 7 habits for families, and they got to invite their spouses. I mean, and that was just a peer deposit from that organization to their employees. And so it was really impressive how a lot of organizations showed up, and invested during that time. But um, you know, as a result of all the pandemic and things like that, with the great resignation, of course, that's shifted back to, well, people leave bosses, right? And so our business has certainly picked up in the leadership development world, and making
Yeah.
sure that the organizations we work with have a leadership culture and a good leadership framework, common leadership language, and that helps keep your people and retain your people.
I asked you a couple questions earlier about, what some of your favorite things in the 7 habits, but if you allow me, I'd like to get even a little more personal.
Yeah.
Uh, um, so, what are you focused on as it relates to your own development, and why?
Well, for me, my biggest strength and biggest weakness is my optimism. It's something that I'll always answer this way when this question gets asked. It's making sure I take the time to reflect on the things that have happened in my life, good or bad. But the bad, I tend to cruise over, and I'll just move on to the next. I don't like to focus on my losses. So that's certainly one of them. But another big challenge I have, and why I said, begin with the end in mind. I tend to solution things right in the moment, mostly in my personal life,
Hmm.
and I will jump to giving a solution instead of sitting there being empathic and just listening. And oftentimes that's all that's actually needed, to completely solve the problem. But I'll sit there and pontificate on whatever the heck I think is the right way to go about something, and it's certainly not always the case. So sitting in
Yeah,
that and working on that.
that's awesome. Here's another question for you, Justin. So, you're B2B, yeah, yeah, you're business to business sales. You're a business selling to businesses to impact, obviously, the individuals and the culture as a whole. That you're working at. Are you able to contain the training, the knowledge, that you are getting as a byproduct in this process? Are you able to contain it to your job, or when you go out and play hockey, or when you meet your neighbor, or when you guys fire up the barbecue and have friends over? How do you not evangelize others in this thing that's almost too good to be true that you're a part of?
Yeah, I'm working on being a coach, right? And listening and guiding, and not so much telling.
Mhm.
It's certainly it's a fantastic question. But I mean, if you go look at my little free library in my neighborhood, it's probably jammed full of Franklin Covey books.
You
No,
guys
but
have one of those. Is yours by the post office boxes or?
we've got a little community, like pool and little
Yeah,
community center, and
yeah.
they just stood it up, and I probably donated 27 bucks.
Did,
So
did you have your name in it just in case
no, so
they
no,
own?
I didn't. I figured I'm doing it for the brand as a whole. This should not benefit me. Free Boy Scout library, I kept my name out of there, but now the whole
Yeah.
world knows, Jim. Thanks for ratting me out. No, but it's a great question, and my wife would tell you that I try to Franklin Covey her all the time. So it is tough.
That's great. That is great. Oh man. Hey, I have really enjoyed this time, but before we sign off, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you would like to say, hey, whether it's on the sales side, the building a team side, or even personal development?
You know, it's never going to be for everybody.
Hmm.
I think after 2.5 years in this and working with clients across all industry, by and large, people have a great experience. Not everyone's going to, it's not going to result in a behavior change in everyone. And
Right.
so maybe you don't see this massive ROI, but there's certainly personal impact.
Hmm.
And there is certainly an ROI.
Hmm.
If companies would challenge themselves on being the ones that really determine what the end in mind is for, hey, are we going to do this personal development thing? Are we going to do this leadership development thing? What do we want it to look like after? What are our expectations for this thing? Let's find a way to measure it. Um, I can just about guarantee you that number, that metric, whatever it is that you decide to look at, it's going to move. So I would say take the chance on it, but also take the time to do it right and think about the way you're implementing it. Um, yeah.
Well, you just gave me some more room here. When what would you say what is your best customer, look like? Is it a small company? Is it a medium-sized company? However those are defined today. Is it a behemoth? What that's part of the question. You're young, so you can remember these questions. If you were interviewing me, I'd say, let's do one at a time, please. Uh, so, who's your target customer? And then where do you typically enter in at? What door do you enter in? Do you enter at the top? You enter at HR? Where, is it like a lucky bounce that happens where somebody heard something and then someone picks up the phone and calls you? What does that look like?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, again, we work with clients of just about any size. I mean, you
Hmm.
could be a company of 15, or you could be a 180,000 person company.
Yeah.
Um, the best clients I work with are where it's starting at the top, where they genuinely believe they're the ones who put that mission statement on the wall in the office,
Yeah.
and they're the ones driving the change and really taking ownership of the culture. That's where it is the best. And that's why this particular company is on the best places to work list every single year. And I'll go as far as saying they're in the trades. So
Okay.
super uncommon, super,
Really?
super uncommon to see that level of investment from a company in the trades, and the executive leadership ones owning every ounce of the result. Um,
Wow. Now
so
that is a shock to me. I would not agree. And just to go with what you said, and hopefully this will benefit the listener. If you're in sales, if you possibly can, the place, today we don't even like talking about top down, but the truth is if you want to penetrate the culture, you're fighting too many wars if you don't enter in at the executive level. If they don't own it, it's pretty tough because it gets squashed, somewhere down the process. Now I do have, winning stories of getting in the side door and virusing up, down, and sideways. But I would also say, and this is going to make some people go, "What?" In many cases, it's taken a decade to do that in an organization. So it's not really the speed of the sale as much as the influence and the virusing and the impact that we want to have. The most effective thing is, if you're going to be stubborn, you might want to be stubborn at getting into the decision makers who are going to have to model it and work on it themselves, um, and let it cascade, through the organization. Would you agree with that?
100%.
Yeah.
The way I look at it, Jim, it's kind of when you walk into the room with whoever the buyer might be that you're talking to, it's like, hey, are you looking for a good experience? Yeah, all right, we can do the experience thing. It's very transactional, right? All right, are we looking for a behavior change in our people? All right, what resources do you have at your disposal to throw at this? Because behavior change is hard.
Yeah.
And then is a strategy, right? Is
Hmm.
this, and if this is strategy, I need to be talking to your entire executive team,
Yes.
because they all
Yes.
need to be committed. Otherwise, we're going to end right back there over at experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's how I always kind of, when I'm framing the conversations that I have, that's either the way I'm reflecting about it, or sometimes I'll even go as far as sharing that if I can't figure out where this person is in the organization or what influence they have, I'll be like, hey, what are we trying to do here? Right?
Hmm.
Are we just trying to give people a good experience? Are we trying to get a behavior change, or is this part of your strategy as a company? So
How are you getting to that level? How are you getting to the decision maker, the executive team member, the president, the CEO, the business owner, whatever label, that they're, how are you getting there? Are they contacting you, or how are you doing that?
50-50, right? Our brand does go a long way. We've been around a
Hmm.
long time, and
Yes, it
and it's
does.
pretty credible. And so yeah, some doors open from that standpoint sometimes. But oftentimes it's exactly what you described. We come in through the side door. We show some tremendous results with in a pocket of a business,
A team.
and yep, and then
Yeah.
we can influence our way anywhere
Yeah.
when the results speak for themselves.
Well, Justin, congratulations on you being in a place that you love, and congratulations on your success with your marriage, your family, and thank you for contributing to really what Lead Today is about, Lead Today Community, which is all about personal growth, leadership growth, and all those things. And I just wish you the very best. And if you see your family before I do, say hello to them, would you?
Yeah, you bet. Will do, Jim. Appreciate you having me.
Thanks again.